So I'll admit that I've been a little bit anxious about doing this inspiration role for this meeting. Kind of trying to figure out what I want to say and what would be inspiring and everything that goes along with it. So I'm just going to start by acknowledging that I haven't been here for the past 2 meetings, and just share a little bit about why I haven't been. Part of the reason is because I've had schoolwork to do. But there's another part that was, the schoolwork was convenient, but the other part was because, you know, a lot of times in Toastmasters meetings, it's a professional meeting, right? And when you come, you want to put forth a good image, and, you know, networking and you know, kind of show your best self. So I admit that in the past 2 weeks or so, you know, the past meetings that I've missed, I haven't felt like my best self. And, you know, it's been up and down, you know, throughout this whole ordeal. And I admit that I just wasn't in the mood for it. And I mean, I never have, you know, facial hair like this. I mean, this is an insult to facial hair. But I don't have a job right now. I'm taking classes. I have, you know, I was going to things in the evenings like Toastmasters and an improv class and things like that. But I have nowhere to go. So part of me feels like, what's the point? And, you know, I'm sharing all of that in case other people feel the same way, but haven't heard it anywhere. You know, what I'm saying it to say to everyone else that if you don't feel okay, it's okay. You know, and I just want to encourage you, if you're going through that, because I know people that have lost their jobs. I know people who have been laid off and haven't been getting paid. You know, this is affecting people in different ways, to different degrees. So I'm opening up, and I'm trying to be a little vulnerable just to give people an understanding that, you know, it's, you don't have to feel like you're the only one. So, you know, I'm putting myself out there just for that sake. And I also encourage you that if you are feeling that way, to reach out to somebody that you're comfortable with. Or if you don't have that, then, you know, reach out to a therapist, because I can tell you from experience that they have lost work too. So they wouldn't mind having an extra client or two. You know, I've been working with a therapist myself for a year or so. 10 years ago, I would never have told that to anybody. But making allowing other people to feel like they're the only one isn't helpful for anybody. So I'm more open now with those things than I used to be, because I think it's more helpful for everybody in general. We don't need to feel like we have it all together or we're so well put together. You know, and that's all that I want really to share with this, is just to open up a little bit and let other people know that it's okay to have ups and downs. But, you know, like I said, just talk to somebody if you feel like you're in a down spot, and, you know, everything will be all right. That's it.
Okay.
I hope you had a fantastic Cinco de Mayo. I woke up Tuesday morning with that feeling that you get when it's your favorite holiday. that anxiousness that says, I can't wait till everybody comes home from work so that I can celebrate. For me, it starts with the food. On Tuesday, I had prepared fresh homemade tamales, homemade hand-crushed guacamole, smooth, perfectly balanced, salsa, sour cream, chips, and to top it all off, a margarita. Well, 2 margaritas. I love Mexican food. I could eat it every meal, every day, for weeks on end without stop. But that's not why Cinco de Mayo is my favorite. Cinco de Mayo is my favorite because it's my anniversary. On May 5th, 1992, I ruptured my spleen in a baseball accident. Cinco de Mayo changed my life and it saved my family. In the early 90s, we were in the midst of the AIDS epidemic. At that time, we believed that you might be able to contract AIDS just by sitting on a toilet seat. I spent 2 weeks in the ICU, constantly being monitored for blood transfusion. You could certainly get AIDS from coming into contact with someone else's blood. It was scary, but that's not why I was afraid. I was afraid because I didn't come from a good family. I was afraid for my first visitors when my family would come in to my room because I felt guilt. I felt responsible for putting them through my medical emergency. And I felt like it would trigger all those things that are terrible about my family. I remember when I first saw my dad, and I wanted to tell him I was sorry. So he came into my room. I said, I'm sorry, Dad. And he said, you don't have to be sorry. I love you. This is the same man that is at the center of dysfunction in my family. I looked over at my oldest sister. She was crying. I didn't know if she cared if I had lived or died before that. And that was her way of saying, I love you. Tragedy has a way of bringing people together. That's why I love Cinco de Mayo. I celebrate that through tough times, love finds a way. And I think about the current situation we're in, and I wonder if one day we'll be celebrating this epidemic. I wonder if we'll be celebrating the fact that we are confined with people that we've spent a lot of time with and experienced a lot of things together. I can't help but hope that we all celebrate this time some years down the road. Oh no, can you hear the music? No, it's not working. Okay. Now can you hear it? Okay. Well, I tried to play a song that was about put a little love in your heart, just to bring that serious life story to happy times and why I do celebrate. I'd like to turn it back over to the Toastmaster, Leanne.
Two people go out in the rain. One gets cold and wet. The other one dances in the rain. What's the difference? It's raining for both of them. the situation is exactly the same. The difference is in the way they view that situation they're in. We're in a very unique situation now. We're stay at home, quarantine. I happen to be blessed because my business is considered an essential business, so I can still do business, although very differently, but I can still do business. But some things have changed. And I want to tell a couple of stories that have happened just recently. One of the things that I found to do is to reach out to people that I haven't necessarily had time to talk to. Now, let me interject here. I spend a fair amount of time online, and I've seen a number of people on Facebook that are getting cold and wet, and others who are dancing in the rain. And I have to ask myself, what's the difference? And again, the difference is how they perceive the situation. The situation's the same. It amazes me, it saddens me actually, to see people online who are complaining about being with their spouse, for instance. Now, I can't imagine personally, because my wife is online too, why I would complain about being home with her. Number one, I happen to like being home with her. But why would I put out there to everyone that I'm cold and wet? Why not take the chance, maybe brighten someone's day and say, well, I'm dancing in the rain. I want to tell you a couple of stories about some calls that I've made. Again, having a little more time to do things that I didn't do before. I've reached out to some people in my past that I haven't talked to in a long time. The first call was to a business friend. We functioned together as contractors that helped each other do some jobs a number of years ago, over 30 years ago. And I haven't talked to this guy for probably 10, 12 years. His name is Paul. So I thought, well, I'll give Paul a call. So I called him, and I got his voicemail. I thought, well, I'm not going to get a chance to call him, but talk to him. But at least I'll say, hey, just wondering how you're doing. Check in, is everything okay? Are you healthy? Do you need anything? They're in Pennsylvania, but not that far away. That if they did need anything, I could help. So I left that on his voicemail, not thinking that I would hear anything back. Interestingly enough, later that day, I got a call from Paul. Now, Paul has a contagious laugh and just a disposition that finds something positive in everything. And let me explain. Paul's calling from a hospital bed where he's getting ready to go through surgery because he had a medical situation that he had ignored and had to get a transfusion to actually stay alive. And now he's preparing for surgery. But he's still laughing and finding humor in the situation and then going through some things about his old property that I helped him sell and the history of it and things that are going on in Frederick and all these statistics, because Paul is a statistic guy. But the thing about that call is, even though he's calling from a hospital bed getting ready for surgery, it was uplifting to both of us. It felt great for me to be able to go over with Paul some of the memories, some of the things that we've done before and things in the past, and he's sharing things that he's going through with me. And I know it made him feel good. I would have to think, if I were in a hospital bed waiting for surgery and someone called me or to talk to an old friend, it would be great. So I felt like I was able to give something to Paul, a dance in the rain, if you will. The other call I want to tell you about is to a cousin of mine. When I was a kid, there were certain cousins that we hung around with, two brothers in particular, Ronnie and Manuel. Ronnie came over to the farm and did some hunting with us. Manuel and his wife, Linda, were a lot more involved. We go to their house for a Sunday dinner. They come to our house for a Sunday dinner. We go out and have picnics and just do things together. A lot of great memories. I remember when Linda, his wife, got pregnant, had a little girl. We called her Little Linda, obviously. And I hadn't talked to Little Linda for a long, long time. Well, I left Little Linda a message, and she called me back. And I had the opportunity to go through all sorts of wonderful memories with Little Linda. By the way, Little Linda is now staying with her daughter and helping with their granddaughter. So I know it kind of gives me a certain feeling, remembering that I played with her as a baby, and now she's taking care of her granddaughter. But it was great to go through the memories of the things that we'd done before, the times out at our farm, the times at their place, some of the warm things that we'd done. And if you will, we danced in the rain. We could have gotten cold and wet because we're both stuck in our houses, but we didn't. We danced in the rain. I thought it was particularly interesting. A couple of you have made yourselves very vulnerable today. And I want to say that I view vulnerability as a strength, not a weakness. It takes a strong person to admit they're vulnerable. It takes a strong person to open up. Andrew, that was fabulous. Saying that, you know, you're talking to a therapist. That's strength. You're a strong guy. I appreciate that. And you know, maybe it's kind of a bummer being in the house, but in a sense, being vulnerable with us, or Beth being vulnerable with us, you're dancing in the rain. We have a choice, minute to minute, on how we react to this situation we're in. And I want to encourage you, no matter what your situation, I know people have lost jobs, people are suffering, people have lost income. We've seen people lose an opportunity to buy a house because they were furloughed. But we all have a choice of getting cold and wet or dancing in the rain. And I want to encourage you, please, 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 find a reason to dance in the rain. Adam Toastmaster.
Tonight, I am the topics master. This is one of my favorite parts of the meeting because it's off the top of your head. And amazing things can happen when you just have a flow of consciousness. Today, I thought we could cover the subject of communication because we're doing a lot of that and we've changed the way we communicate. Zoom meetings, for one. And could you imagine 5-6 years ago that this is the way we'd be having meetings and keeping in touch? So I want to ask some questions about communications. And what I'm going to do, unlike Ben Cat last week, I'm going to ask you to volunteer. And you can send us a chat message to everyone. I believe that's how it works, Inu. So here's the question. Cell phones and smartphones have allowed us to access to other people in ways never dreamed of even 20 years ago. Is this a good thing? And if it is a good thing, why do you consider it to be a good thing to have more access to people with this type of communication? And okay. Joe, are you volunteering?
I am.
Okay, Joe. Go for it, Joe.
You know, I like the current media approach that we're using. You know, the fact that you can get information from any device you have on hand, whether it's a phone, whether it's an iPad, or whether it's your computer. And this new epidemic that we're facing, the fact that we have to talk from home or wherever we are, makes it more evident that we need to do that. But we need to learn to use these devices more effectively. For example, I'm slowly getting used to all the different tools that we have at AstraZeneca. And the way when I used to have problems with someone, I used to just walk to their desk, wherever that was in the building, and then talk to them. Because some people talk and communicate better that way. And now that I don't have that, I have to very forcibly say, let's schedule a Skype meeting, or let's schedule a Teams meeting, or we can't do Zoom yet. We're not allowed. But I have to figure out, let's have that one-to-one conversation, 15, 20 minutes with a Skype or a Teams call. Because that's the only way I can do it. I used to be able to walk by their desk, drop off the material I wanted to talk with them, and have a discussion, or let them browse through it. So that's been a little more difficult. But what I like about some of the tools we have is I can very easily look it up on my phone. For Teams, I can download the app on my phone and look and scroll down and look at the event that I'm supposed to conference call with, and I call right in through that. Or I can use Teams on my desktop, or Zoom, or whatever. But it's really made conversation more frequent, because everyone wants conversation. They're starved for time. So I think technology has helped me, at least, be a better communicator, because I have to talk to people.
The upside to technology. I have another question now. Now that we're home more often, have you noticed that telemarketers, the spam calls constantly? I will get 10 or 20 a day. So my question to you is, should telemarketing be illegal, and why? Does anybody have would like to do that? You can. Anu, you're laughing about that. Would you like to take that up? And okay, Tom, let's go. Tom, the floor is yours, Tom.
Okay, telemarketing, and the problem with telemarketers is quite an issue for me. It frustrates me to no end. Every time I go to answer the phone, it's a telemarketing call. As a matter of fact, we have now canceled our landline because that's all we got on it for telemarketing calls. So I have two techniques that I use for telemarketing. The first one is, everybody uses this. You take your phone, and when you get a telemarketing call, you can go into the phone app and set it to block that caller. That makes me feel a little better, but I know that they're just using some robo-dialing mechanism, and they're going to ultimately call me again. So the second technique is the one that I really like. When they call me, I'll answer the phone, and if I'm certain, reasonably certain, that it's a spam call, I'll put on my best, deepest, darkest voice, and I'll go, "Yes, who is this? Oh, I'm going to find you. I'm going to hunt you down." Sometimes I even go a little further than that. Beth has warned me I probably shouldn't do this, and I know that social etiquette tells me these people are really just trying to do their job, and every now and then I will actually talk to them and say, please don't call me. No, I don't need gutters. No, I don't need windows and all these other things. But I have to tell you, when I put on the deep voice, it kind of makes me feel good. And that is how I handle telemarketers. One note though, I have found that with social distancing and people who can't go into work, I've actually gotten very few telemarketing calls. So I don't know, maybe on not Cinco de Mayo, but Cinco de 7, sometime in the future, I'll think back and go, there really weren't that many telemarketers during the pandemic. Madam Toastmaster, or Madam Table Topics Master.
Toastmaster, and it is now 7:33. I have time for one more, Toastmaster?
Yes,
Okay.
go do one more.
Okay. Okay, one more communication question. Would the world be better off if we all spoke just one language? What would be lost? Let me repeat that. Would the world be better off if we all spoke just one language? And what would be lost if we did? Would anybody like to answer that? Come up with a no? Okay, Andrew. Go for it, Andrew. Where are you, Andrew? I don't see you.
So
there you are. Okay.
Here I am. If the world only spoke one language, that's interesting to think about, but I think a lot would be lost. It reminds me of the years that I taught English as a second language, and in particular when I was at the language school in DC, because there were students from all over the world that attended that school, and it was a fantastic mix. And I remember telling some of my students who would ask about their accents, you know, can you help me get rid of my accent? And my reaction was, why would you want to do that? Unless it impedes understanding, that's part of your identity. And, you know, it's really something you might want to think about holding on to, because if it doesn't distort meaning or make a problem for understanding, I don't think that it's a problem. It actually adds a lot and enriches a lot of experiences for the people around you and for your own self. So if the world only spoke one language, I think there would be a lot lost. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Gerry, you opened yourself up and showed some vulnerability, which is a little bit of a theme for this evening. And as we've discussed in previous meetings, exposing a vulnerability is a great way to connect with an audience. And I think you connected well with your audience tonight. I felt a connection, and I think others did as well. When I asked you ahead of time if there was anything in particular to look out for that you wanted me to watch for, you expressed a couple of concerns. You thought that you might be talking a little bit too much about the food and not enough about your personal story, and wondered which details might be too much or what stories and details work. Well, I think that the amount you talked about the food was just right, because if you just say, I love the food, it's a blah statement. But the way you talked with emotion and actually gestures about you hand grinding the guacamole and making the other item that you made, it was very descriptive and it was great. And it was leading us into the mindset of celebration. It was help supporting that idea of a celebration, which you wanted us to have. So I thought that was effective. I didn't think it was too much on the food, and I didn't think it was too many details. You also said you want this to be inspirational and happy, and I think you were a little bit concerned that because of the drama of your family drama that you explain in the story, that it might bring it down and not be as inspirational. And I don't think that was an issue from what I observed. Your pacing was excellent, including your pauses. And rather than talk about vocal variety, I'll talk about energy level variety, something that you're particularly keen to watch in other people. And I've gotten that kind of feedback from you, to like not be up all the time, and you had a really good rising and falling with your energy level and your passion, and also vocal variety as well. Recovering from the technical difficulty when you couldn't play the song, and then you just told us what the song was, that was good. For items for improvement, I would have probably given up on the song just a little bit sooner and just said what the song was, or something. If you're brave enough, sing a little bit for us. You could have tested that technology in advance. So note for the future, when you need to use technology, try it out. You can do it, use this actual Zoom meeting with one other person or just by yourself, possibly. I would have liked just a little bit more detail about the change to your family. Did it persist? So your story had a really nice setup. You told us it was your anniversary, and I thought it was your wedding anniversary. Probably most people thought that. And then quickly it became clear that it was not your wedding anniversary. So it had a nice build up, it had a nice rise, and then it had a climax. And then the falling action was a little bit short. I wanted a little bit more of that fall after the climax of what happened and what happened with your family. I wanted to know that it wasn't just one day change, but that there was something that continued. Because you said it saved your family, and I wasn't getting that it saved your family from the way you described it during the falling action. And then comparing, I forgot to pin the timer yet again. Shoot, and I feel like I'm going over. Can't find the timer. There it is. I am at red. So finally comparing COVID-19 with your experience, that wasn't a strong comparison for me because you had an emergency hospital visit that brought your family together. I don't know that COVID-19 is necessarily bringing families together in all cases, so you might instead suggest, I hope that something good comes out of it that you can celebrate later. That might have been a more easy connection to make. Great speech, and it was inspirational. Thank you.
Larry, I haven't heard every speech you've ever done, but I've heard you do and seen you do quite a few. I am going to hands down say this, for me, was your most relatable, audience relatable speech. I felt like you were talking to us or to me rather than at me. And I think that's one thing that I've noticed about your past speeches is it was more of a talk at that just didn't seem completely connected, and you overcame that tremendously tonight. Your speech was well organized. There was a clear opening, clear body, and a clear conclusion. I loved your opening, which you and I had talked about in advance. A lot of time, I've heard many times in Toastmasters that one way to engage the audience from the beginning of a speech is to ask a question, such as, how many people, personally, I don't think that's a good engager, but sometimes it works. I think even more effective is starting out with a story, with no preface or lead, not even saying, I want to tell you a story, or have you heard this? You started the story from the very first word. And it was a metaphor, and it was a short one. It was very easy to understand, everyday language, and that you riddled that throughout the whole speech, and you concluded with it. Let's see. And the metaphor that you used created a mental image, and that image popped in my head every time you referenced it. And one of the other really good things you did was the speed of your speech. You have in the past maybe talked too fast, or for me, not as much too fast as not taking pauses. It's just one big run on, and you did it slow. And it was a thoughtful, contemplative speech, so that was good. And your pauses, I really did not see any place where you could have paused more. And you know me, I'll slam Larry for every little thing that he does. And your gestures, you're within the frame where you're positioned, your head, and down just to a little above your stomach, not too much extra space, very well set within the stage. You included personal stories within your speech, which I think were effective, and you told them very naturally. You were just telling us stories. So I usually would have a lot of things to tell you to think about. So tonight, the only one I have is your title was absolutely horrible. But other than that, great speech.
Everyone take it easy and be safe.
Bye.
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 Bye.